the past few decades in the United States, and really over a longer period than that, but especially over the past few decades. So can we talk a little bit about why we think people have become less religious in the 20th and 21st centuries? One thing I hear from a lot of people is actually related to the Christian right, but I wanted to hear what you guys think.
I'm not going to answer your question. I am instead going to say something related to your question. I heard someone say, and I forget who it was, but I think it was one of these new style evangelical young writers, say that getting divorced the first time you fall out of love is like trading in your car the first time it runs out of gas. I hear people very often describe themselves as spiritual but not religious. But to me, spirituality is very dependent on so many things. I tell people, if I only behaved like a married person when I was feeling actively in love, I wouldn't stay married very long. Relationship is work, and sometimes you don't feel like doing the work, but you keep showing up and doing the work because the work needs to be done. And that's how you keep the relationship strong and healthy. My usual position is that religion is what shows up for work when spirituality calls in sick. I think a reliance on so-called spirituality in the absence of the discipline by a specific religious tradition is a recipe for having your spirituality be reliant on your mood, on your circumstances, on all kinds of things beyond your control. Whereas what religion does, a discipline, a confessed faith, a regular application of yourself, is that it does the work when the work needs doing and you don't feel like doing it. And I think what the churches are failing to do is give people a reason to understand that. The churches are failing to show people the value of the work of religion and its service to the emotional and subjective and feeling life of spirituality.
I think that is all. I think that's right. And mostly I just have a gazillion different answers to this question going through my head simultaneously. So we'll see which one I end up talking about by the time I end this sentence. I think I'm going to do the 30,000 foot thing and think about how it has to do a lot with just the opening of possibility for people to decide what they want to be in their life in general over the last half century. That just the we talk about after 1960s Cultural Revolution and just the opening of possibility that, hey, you know what, maybe I can get a lot of what my parents wanted me to get from church in other ways, and I don't have to get up on Sunday morning. Or maybe I can sort of filter for myself what in the tradition I inherited is worthwhile and what is not worthwhile. And part of what is not worthwhile for me is going to this place every week. And then a related thing that once that filtering has happened is, I've sort of filtered out that what matters to me are these really big ideas about universal love and caring for something beyond oneself, caring for others as much or more than one cares for oneself. And then when you do go back on Sunday morning, hearing things that are totally disjoint from that, or when you turn on the news, hearing things that are totally disjoint from that. And I think a lot of people see a disconnect between the very high goods of their traditions and how it gets manifested by people. And so I think if you want to point to a thing that the churches, since I'm speaking from the liberal mainline Protestant world, I think the churches have not moved quickly enough to adjust all the levels on their different tracks, of their different audio tracks. So they've got these audio tracks of 1600-year-old creedal confessions that are talking about very specific beliefs articulated to resolve debates in the 4th, 5th, and 6th century. And people are like, I don't even know. I'm like only 65% on whether there's God. I don't need to get into like all of this Athanasian stuff. Just, talk to me about love and talk to me about, who Christ was and why I'm better off with Christ in my life and the world is better off with Christianity. And I think the churches haven't moved quickly enough to sort of tone down the things that are going to make people go, yeah, no, I'm better off going to brunch. And I don't think that brunch is a bad thing. To be clear. Not mutually exclusive, but tone down the things that are going to make people say, no, this place isn't worth coming back to, and turn up the things people go, oh my gosh, yes, this is a sacred flame that is being carried through centuries of humanity and is very important, and I want to be part of it.
So I guess that starts to answer the follow-up question, which is, how do you get people back into the church? Or should we be getting people back into the church? Or, what's the future? So if the answer then is the churches need to do a better job sort of meeting people where they are and providing the things for them that they can't get elsewhere. I may be misreading what you're saying, but that's sort of what I'm pulling out of it, and maybe there are ways of doing that. I mean, I think that Scott's right about this idea of doing the work that needs to be done, and shouldn't just make it so easy for people that they don't have to have any effort, because then there's no commitment either. But maybe the answer is to have church at brunch. But where do you go with that? What is the answer? Should churches writ large here be doing more outreach to bring people back into them? Is there some other path that we're going toward here?
I'll tell you, the two words in the question that make me uneasy are the words "should churches."
Fair enough, yes.
Because, I mean, I think there are probably as many answers to that. For every successful growing church, you can find a different answer to that. I mean, the church I attend has been growing in activities, in numbers, in commitment, in impact. It's been wonderful. And in the meeting room, the staff room, there's a sign on the wall that says how to implement a new idea. And it's a flow chart. And the first says seek partners. And then if there are no partners, the flow chart sends you back to the beginning, seek partners. The way that our church has been able to grow as much as it has been to partner with other community organizations over things that are important to all of us, whether it's gun control or free and fair funding for the schools or living wage or various teen job programs. And I think in our case, one of the things that has been appealing about our church is that we do those things because they are good things. We don't do them to get people to come to church. We do those things because they make the world a better place, and people see that, and some of them come to the church, and some of them don't. And that's great. That's all great. It's all good, because everything good is happening. And I really believe it's a mistake to do things to get people to come to church.
That makes absolute sense to me, and it makes me think of an example. So I worked for a couple of years as the interim Lutheran campus minister at the University of Chicago, and we started doing a program called Comfort Food for Finals. And sort of against the spirit of what was just said, I did first envision it as like, boy, this would be a really great outreach opportunity. Like Lutherans have this sort of like middle / lower middle tradition of like bringing a bunch of cheap food to a church potluck. So why don't we like take that on the road and like share a bunch of cheap food? We picked macaroni and cheese with college students the night before finals study period began, as sort of brain food and comfort food at a dismal time. And it immediately became apparent that there was not going to be a big recruiting event. We weren't going to all of a sudden have 15 new people show up because we gave them macaroni and cheese. But it also became immediately apparent that we didn't care, because what we were doing was exactly an outflow of our mission, which is to offer care and comfort and, indeed, even though it's in macaroni and cheese form, love to people without expecting anything in return. And this was a super Lutheran moment, but we actually had a student who was going through the line and sort of like gave us this bewildered look, and it was like, do I have to give you anything? And we're like, no, I don't have to give you anything. It's fine. Like, do I have to sign up for anything? Like, no, you don't have to sign up for anything. It's great. And like, I haven't done anything to deserve this. And we were like, oh my gosh, the previous campus pastor is going to nerd out so hard when she hears about this. But I think that kind of thing, what Scott said, just getting back to the question of who are we and why, and what does that mean for what we're going to do, and then doing those many things, hopefully, because they're what we do and are called to do, and not because, boy, this will really just bring in a whole bunch of new people. At the same time, I mean, I know that for a lot of congregations or other religious communities, that all sounds great, but it's a question of resources. Over the course of 30 years, they've seen themselves go from people to 50 people to 18 people, and the building still costs as much as it did and even more because it's older. And what do you do about that? A lot of religious communities are having to deal with the question of, is it a failure for us to say goodbye to this building because there's not enough of us, or is it an opportunity for new life? And indeed, here in Chicago and elsewhere, a lot of religious communities have gone through that painful process of sort of saying, all right, we are not about the building. We're giving up this claim to this big visible stone edifice in a prominent location and taking our show on the road. But by doing so and by engaging with the community around them, have seen new life and have all of a sudden seen those numbers go back up to 50 and 100 because they are doing a new thing that is growing out of what is most essential to them, which is gathering in community to celebrate God's love and showing that to people. So much like any organization has to, when facing hard times, get back to the fundamental question of who are we and why, and what would be if we were not. I think by doing that and then following whatever leads out of it is going to be the way forward that bears fruit for folks.
I think that's a really great answer. And I think for me, one thing I would like to see the church do is make the case for communal action. One of the reasons I think general religious observation has gone down in the 20th and 21st centuries has been a general decline in sort of communal action. So like there's also been a sort of parallel decline in union membership, in political party affiliation, in lots of different actual community organizations. And so I think for a while there were some churches, primarily evangelical churches, that were sort of getting around this by making the argument that religion was a personal thing, that it was all about your personal relationship with Jesus, and that was what mattered. So mainline churches didn't make that argument as well, and so they suffered an even larger decline in membership than a lot of evangelicals. And so for that reason, I think churches need to make the case for, no, it's not only okay to think about other people, it's the right thing to do. You have to look beyond yourself and your individual, needs and wants. They have to make the case for community.
Yeah, and to that end, I would say that one of the best ways for churches to attract members, and, again, this doesn't need to be in order to attract members, but it does work really well, is through kids. So, my kids go to a Catholic school and we go to the Catholic Church. My husband and I are not religious, but we go to the church, and our kids, in fact, are fairly religious. But, we often go to other churches in the area because they're having some sort of family event, and it's very low key. It's you don't have to sign up for the church, but you're welcome here, and we do feel welcome, and it's the kind of thing that, if we then are looking to join a church, we are far more likely to go to one of these churches where we have been welcomed as a family of young children.
Is there anything else that either of you want to say, want our listeners to know?
I have a question, and you might not end up wanting to use it. It might be dilatory. I think, Kelly, you said, 3 or 4 times now that you're not religious. How would it be different if you were?
That's a good question, and something I've spent a lot of my life thinking about. So, to me, the way that I define that I am not religious, and perhaps the church would or would not care about this, is that I don't believe in God. And so, to me, the things that I do that are religious, and so I send my kids to Catholic school, and I do go to church with them, not every Sunday, but we do go to church. We participate quite a bit